This is the S.J. Childs Show, hosted by S.J. Childs, streaming on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Find us on all social medias. The S.J. Childs Show, bringing value to families through education and resources. Check us out weekly, where we'll have new and exciting guests. Thanks so much for your support. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by S.J. Childs Books for Children. Visit sjchilds.org today to check out their special needs book collection. Teach inclusion and neurodiversity in this special 7-book collection. Get yours today. Sponsors include Blinky Minky Blankets, handmade double-sided Minky blankets, highest quality and craftsmanship, creating your perfect blanket for your loved one as a special forever gift. Code word THEMOUTH for discount today. By Dana Ball Legal Services. Avoid common legal mistakes and protect your small business. Dana makes it affordable for your Utah small business to avoid common legal mistakes with business operations, contracts, and employees. Get more information today at danaballlaw.com. By Moving with Autism, a service for autism families seeking real estate and design services that provide support for their child's development and family lifestyle. Natalie Castro is a Utah autism real estate specialist and autism sibling whose mission is to connect families to community support with sensory-friendly designs and relocation services. By Elevation Chiropractic Center. Get started on your path to full health. Elevation Chiropractic Center uses the upper cervical chiropractic technique to get results by identifying and solving the root issues of your medical condition quickly and safely. Elevation Chiropractic Center, Salt Lake City, Utah. This story is brought to you by Water and Body Basics, West Valley City, Utah.
Hi, and welcome to the S.J. Childs Show. I'm your host, S.J. Childs, and today I have a special guest, and we're going to be talking about a wonderful topic that is a little bit under-discussed. We'll put it that way. Really great education for parents, individuals. Karese, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm appreciative of being able to share today.
Yeah, it's going to be a great discussion. And why don't we just start out with general introduction? Tell us about yourself and what got you started.
Well, I am a myofunctional therapist, which is a mouthful, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But my original profession was registered dental hygiene, and it is actually through that and through my 4 children that I came into myofunctional therapy. They had a whole myriad of things going on with them, different common childhood things, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But it all really stemmed back to the way they were using a lot of the muscles in their face, and it really changed our lives 100-fold.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to get into this and really learn about it more. Tell our viewers and listeners what myofunction is.
So myofunctional therapy is kind of like personal training, but we work exclusively with the muscles below the eyes, but above the shoulders. So working with a lot of those orofacial and some of the oropharyngeal muscles, what we're really getting to establish is proper coordination of these muscles. Mm-hmm. There's over 100 muscles in this complex. And when something is off in the chain, it's going to adversely affect wellness along some tract involving breathing, chewing, and swallowing. Mm-hmm. And so having that retraining of those muscles per se and getting everything to work properly is going to start a lot of those processes on a better path. So we'll be breathing better, we'll be digesting better, our overall wellness will improve because a lot of health honestly starts in the mouth. This is one of the gateways to the rest of the body. So
that's something that people just take for granted because it's there and they just use it all the time now, like I am now. But, it is so true. I remember as a child, my mom in the 70s when I was growing up doing all the like facial exercises and stuff. And they were extremely exaggerated, and we would laugh and she, okay, do these things and make these faces, and we would do these things together. So it's funny how it evolves into like now it's a real profession, and this is like, it's real science, and it has a real, background to it. Tell us a little bit like more about maybe the type of patients that you see and what they come to see you for.
So I see patients pretty much of all ages. Honestly, I've seen like from days old babies all the way into, our geriatric population when we're talking about our older individuals, because really everybody could use it in some way, shape, or form. So when we're talking about the babies and the toddlers and the little ones, we're usually, with myofunctional therapy at least, we're talking about getting them at that early stage where they're struggling with some sort of feeding issue, whether it's the breastfeeding or they're struggling with bottle feeding, because that's a thing that nobody talks about enough. Where they're just struggling at all with gaining weight and so forth. A lot of times you'll find that tethered oral tissues, which is like a nice little hot phrase for a tongue tie or a lip tie, those become involved. And so our myofunctional therapists are really at the front line of making sure that when we have to have those procedures, those surgical procedures, that we are able to heal optimally so that our functional specialists or feeding therapists are able to really get in there and do what they have to do. When it comes to our olders, we're talking about those children, those teenagers. Then we're going to get into where we're starting to see a lot of this dysfunction. So we're seeing the tongue thrust, we're seeing the sleep issues, we're seeing ADHD, which we'll come back and connect those.
I love that.
And these things are actually stemming a lot from the way that they're breathing or the way that they're using their tongue muscles. It's going to adversely affect how they're starting to grow and develop. So you'll see issues where your child may need braces and you're like, what's going on? How come teeth are coming in crooked or behind one another, or everything's looking like it doesn't quite fit in the mouth? So we're helping there to really get a lot of that function, because form follows function, right? So we've got to correct that function if we want the form and their development to really change. So we are there at those stages. Now, when you get past development, so we're talking about now we've lost all of our growth plates and we're at the conclusion of puberty and so forth, and we're at these older teens into just average adulthood. Now we're talking about these compound things. We're talking about obstructive sleep apnea. We're talking about aerophagia, digestive disorders. We're talking about people who have been in braces for many, many years. And then now they're seeing things just shift back. And they're like, I did braces like 3 times over a course of 6 years. I don't understand why anything won't stay. Wow. Even when you're wearing your retainers, they don't stay. And so we're helping to overcome various issues at many different stages of life.
That's incredible. And of course, probably for the geriatric stage, when they lose their teeth, I mean, what happens then, right? I'm sure that's a big struggle and a change of muscular, use.
Yeah, you'll find that a lot of people think that having dentures is easier and that life is better because now I don't have to brush, I don't have to floss. I can just take them out, pop them in, a little bit of water, and then that's it. I'm good to go. But that's not actually the case. There's a lot of learning there. Those have to sit in with suction, and that suction has to actually be achievable within your oral cavity. And so it's a big adjustment factor. Yes.
I bet it is. Oh, that's amazing. And it is something that, like you said, everybody can really have a little bit of use for, right? We can all have a little bit of more knowledge on how to use our muscles and for swallowing, things like that. So when you have like a baby that comes in that has swallowing issues, what types of tips do you give the parents to help them work through those things with their child?
So the biggest thing I like to address with them is that nothing's going to happen overnight. A lot of things that have gone wrong with these tongue tie release procedures is that somebody will discover that they're having a problem. They'll run straight away to an ENT or a dentist to go get that problem just removed. Let's just get it surgically removed and everything should be fine. It's actually not going to work like that, because at every age and stage, we have 8 muscles that work in pairs to help coordinate our tongue. So everybody's thinking about the tongue as like this one muscle, but it's actually like a complex organ where 16 different muscles are moving and shaping that tongue in different ways. You have to get that retraining done. And some of that honestly has to be done before you can even go in for the procedure, because in some cases, you might not even need the procedure. In some cases, you might be able to retrain naturally. So it's really important that you get that first anticipatory care step done of going and seeing somebody who is able to functionally assess what's going on, working with them and getting those initial stages started, because it could intentionally like change what your actual plan is.
That's really incredible. And I mean, obviously we're in different states, and are there myofunctional therapists here in Utah? Like, do I just Google it in and try to find someone here? Or what's the best steps that I would take if I want to find someone?
If you're looking for a therapist, I would say the best thing is, Google is everybody's best friend.
Yeah, right? Your brain.
They are not in abundance. It's going to be difficult for many people to find one that's within a 5 or 10 mile radius. Sometimes you'll have to travel a little bit out to find one. Yeah. But we are in every state. We are around in some numbers, right? I want to say there's probably less than 1,000 across the US. But first step, Google myofunctional therapist near me. There's also the opportunity to now, because COVID has opened up so many of these Zoom and virtual meeting sessions, there's that option too of seeing somebody who is not necessarily in your area, who might be able to do things with you virtually. Now, is that going to work for those younger ones, the toddlers, the babies? No, you definitely want to find somebody in your area. With the older populations, yes, absolutely. Teletherapy is an amazing thing.
No, that's a really, really great point, because we have to kind of step into this new world we're living in and take advantage of the things that we have available to us through online services. So that's really great to know. Oh, that's wonderful. Now for older, like sleep apnea, like you talked about that, let's talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to go back and talk about ADHD, because we don't want to miss out on that, how that ties back in. But we'll stick with our geriatric section right now, and like sleep apnea. I mean, it does happen for younger. What do you think? I mean, what do you see the kind of age groups that have that happening for them?
So obstructive sleep apnea can happen to literally anyone. It can even happen to babies. And surprisingly enough, while we have known about obstructive sleep apnea in adults for decades, I would say at least a century, we actually only discovered that children do suffer from obstructive sleep apnea as well in 1976. 1976, like within our lifetime, they just now discovered that there are plenty of children who suffer from this too. So at any age and stage, this can happen. But obstructive sleep apnea is essentially when there is a stoppage or a blockage in the upper respiratory tract. So when we're thinking about lying back, right? Our first stages of sleep is everything relaxing, all of our muscles relaxing, our blood pressure and our heart rate, it slows down, everything starts to relax. We lie back and that tongue falls back, those soft tissue muscles get lax. And suddenly now, when you're breathing in, something along the way just collapses, because that tongue may be blocking the way, those lax muscles may have just closed in on each other. Sometimes you even hear the narrowing, and that's snoring.
Yeah.
Nobody
that's
thinks
when I give my husband a good turn over.
Everybody thinks that snoring is like just, a normal thing, but that's actually the sound of air meeting resistance going through that airway. So that's a sign that things are closing up. Air is forcefully trying to get in there, and that's your snore. So when you're seeing your children snore, big red flag, huge red flag, because we want our children to be able to breathe normally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like one of the staples of parenting. You're not a parent unless you've sat over your child and you're like, are they breathing?
Yeah, for sure, right? Especially those early days. Oh, gosh.
Exactly. So that snoring is dysfunctional breathing. And we want breathing to be optimal because sleep is supposed to be restorative.
Yes.
We can't restore, we can't renew, we can't revive. And especially with children, if they don't hit their stage 3 in sleep and they don't stay in it long enough, they don't get human growth hormone. So now they're stunting their growth, it's limiting their brain activity, and it's going to affect their next day. With adults, definitely our short-term memory is impaired. There are so many links with poor sleep and the start or the development of Alzheimer's and dementia. So these are things that we have to make sure that we're optimizing. When there's a snore, it's a sign of concern. That is a huge red flag. It's time to get yourself assessed and evaluated, because there are ways that with myofunctional therapy, it's been very well researched to actually stimulate a lot of these muscles. There are invasive procedures that you can get something to stimulate your tongue at night while you sleep. And then that's going to get your tongue to move up and out of your airway. But you can also naturally, because it's comprised of many muscles, work out those muscles. Yeah. And get everything to move up and out of the way naturally as well.
How interesting. Oh, we're definitely going to having talk about that. Yeah, that's so interesting. And my mind was flashing and just having all of these kind of like, you have these ideas and things like make sense. And you're like, okay, wait, that makes sense to this. And this makes sense. So in this, see what you think of this. So my son that has autism and my husband, who also has autism, have very irregular sleeping patterns. They both sleep 5-6 hours, maybe sometimes 8 to 10, but it's normally a 5 to 6 hour time period. They both, at least, my husband's grown, so I can ask him about his childhood and he can tell me, and rather than I can't really do that with my son, just watch. But they both, my husband was very short until he hit maybe like a 16, I think, or something, and then shot straight up and went like a foot in a year or something, like very quickly. And so now I see where my son has definitely a stunted growth pattern because probably, multitude of things, sleeping, eating, lack of vitamin taking, these types of things, stinkers. And so, but now I'm seeing kind of that same pattern, and because his little sister is 2 inches taller than him at least, and she's 2 years younger than him. So, and it just all clicked, and it linked in. I bet that has a lot to do with it. So, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Same
absolutely.
pattern.
A lot of the families that I work with, when the children are improving in their sleep, that's when you'll start to see that growth happen.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, wow, this is like something that I don't know how long they've been stunted. So
yeah,
it really makes a difference. We need sleep. It's a third of our life. We have to have to do that well. If we're not doing it well, everything just falls out of place.
And I wonder if it for them, and I don't know, obviously I don't know my husband when he was a child. I wonder if their overactive brain is so hard to let go of and relax as children. And then they hit that point in that teenage after puberty where they're just like, just leave me alone, I want to sleep. And then that is when that growth kicks in, and that kind of happens. So it was just, I don't know, just my thought process while you were saying that.
Yeah, no, it definitely, it rings a bell. The first time I started learning about these things, it rang bells for me.
Yeah.
All of my children, there were definitely things that I was like, wait.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense. It definitely does. The more you dive into the science.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about the ADHD and those connections. I think that's so fascinating as well.
Yes. So ADHD, actually, we have to always remember, is not something that we do like a blood test or we get a CAT scan or we have some sort of definitive diagnosis for, right? It's always symptom-based. So when we have something that is symptom-based, it's important now that we look at what other things might be causing these very similar symptoms. So when we're doing that, and you look at the research, there's actually, and the research is going to vary, but it's between a 40 to 70% overlap between the symptoms of sleep disordered breathing and ADHD. So they both manifest relatively the same, especially in children with ADHD, because tired children are not like tired adults. Tired adults are lethargic. Tired children, hyperactive. You're going to see more activity.
Oh, yeah.
That child that's bouncing around that you're like
giggling, tired, over giggling, sense of tired. Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, it's so interesting.
Yeah. So when you have something that you can't get a definitive test for that's very symptom based, and then you have something that's very similar, it's really important that people seek out sleep studies, because a sleep study is going to be your definitive way to say either yay or nay. Like, yes, this might be true ADHD, but in a lot of cases, we're finding that it's not true ADHD. It's actually obstructive sleep apnea in childhood.
Oh, wow. It's so interesting. So do you think that why do you think it's increasing?
There's a lot of different reasons. We are changing and evolving just as a society. When we look at how we're feeding children, a lot of the children, when we start going into feeding solids, and I got to put air quotes around that, solids, because we don't go into solids. We go into baby food, mushed foods. So they don't get to use their jaws. Jaw stimulation only happens through chewing. And if we're not chewing and they're having those pouches or prolonged periods of just cereal, spoons, and smushed food, they're not going to develop their jaws adequately. So when we don't develop really good jaws, that's when we're going to have a problem, because in back of our jaws, right behind those teeth, what's back there? That's all your airway. That's your upper respiratory tract. So when you're not developing that well, it's going to cause problems down the chain, because breathing is primary. We can go for a while without food, maybe a few days without water, but not many of us would last more than a few minutes without air.
So true. Yeah, absolutely. No, what about binkies or like thumb sucking? What type of, I mean, obviously it's bad, but is it also good? Because they are using it. It's like more usage, but overusage in the wrong way, probably.
Non-nutritive sucking definitely has its pros. There are definite good reasons that we should seek and provide non-nutritive sucking for children. We want to make sure that it is something that is going to be constructive. So if they're going to be using a binky, you want to use it for the duration of time that they need it, and then take it away before they grow attachment. So usually they find around 5 or 6 months, that's where they gain that attachment.
Yeah.
Take that away.
Didn't do that.
And then it's time to introduce things, because at 5 or 6 months, you can now start to introduce things that maybe even if it's just a teether, they could start to chew on and develop that stimulation, that oral stimulation in a different way that's more constructive, right? The thumb is harder to get rid of. It's much more difficult. I would say you'd want to discourage it as much, and maybe encourage something that you can take away, a removable item like a binky or a pacifier. I would say definitely, though, that if you can't break it, then you just let it go till about age 3. Don't stress yourselves. Moms, we have enough to stress about. Parents, we have enough to stress about. We don't need to stress until about age 3. Then you can start actively working on taking it away, because the child will be more cooperative with you then. They get more of those social cues at that point in time. They probably don't want to see their friends, or they don't want their friends to see them, I should say. Come in their mouths. And so I would wait until about 3 if you have to break that. But if you can break the pacifier earlier, please do, because it all is going to impact the trajectory of growth, because we have to look at where it's resting. So that thumb would be resting up top, and that pacifier oftentimes would be resting up top too on the palate. It tends to push up and narrow that upper arch, that palate. When we're looking at our bodies and we're thinking anatomically, that roof of the mouth is actually also the floor of the nose. So when you have a narrow and a high Floor of the nose, that's when we're looking at deviated septums, inabilities to really adequately nasal breathe because you have a more narrow passageway. And so that's going to impact a lot of other issues, upper respiratory problems.
Definitely.
So if we can get rid of it as early as possible, please do. And encourage other things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And I think that was really great advice because, and I like that you said, if you kind of miss that time period, like let it go, because I think that so many parents in those, 2 to 3, it's like, okay, they have to be potty trained. They have to have the binky out. They have to, And I am such a huge firm believer, only because of my own experiences with my own children, that number one, my kid will go to the bathroom. He has his whole life to do it. He'll do it when he's ready. My kid will, number 2, eat a sandwich. He has his whole life to do it. If he wants to wait until he's 12, 36, someday in his life, it's up to him. Like, I'm not going to force foods that make him, well, both my husband and my son, they're so very similar. It's wonderful to be able to, see the two and to be able to put like really good firm belief behind it rather than just like, what's wrong? Oh, kind of an idea. But food aversions, they go deep in our family. Like, you show my son a piece of bacon and he will gag till he's out of the room. Like, he doesn't, the sight of any meats or anything like that, it physically bothers him. He cannot look at those kinds of things. And so we learned early on, these are the best ribs ever. Just take a bite, and and it's just like, finally, okay, that's not fair. Don't do that to him. Traumatizing your child is different than helping them try foods.
Exactly.
There's such a fine line, but such a very big line. Like, don't cross the line. I'm sure that some people, and of course, most parents don't mean to. It's not their intention to cause trauma, to cause harm, things like that. But our society's ideas of how children need to eat, what times of the day are appropriate, things like that. Like, our biology knows these things. And the more we listen and the more we teach our children to listen to their biology, the better off as human beings, I think, we'll be.
Exactly, because no one thing is going to work for everybody. We are all individuals. We have different microbiomes. We have different bodies. We have different temperaments. And so different things are going to work for everybody. Yeah. And I'm very much with you that an individualized route, you can't beat yourself up as a parent. We all do the best we can. And sometimes when you do push things, you actually wind up pushing them further away from something.
Yeah.
So you're better off just letting it go. And eventually, like you said, maybe at his 50th birthday, that's when he'll try those ribs.
That's okay. Like, it's, as long as I'm trying to find ways to get the vitamin in one way or another, or, to just make sure he's, he drinks nothing but water. So there's no harm in that. He's constantly flushing his system out all day long, constantly all day. I mean, it's probably the healthiest water drinker I've ever met.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, there's challenges, and then there's, pick your bites and pick your battles, right? And make sure that you try to stick with biology as much as possible. I love it. Oh, Karese, it's been so wonderful to have this discussion and have time with you today. Thank you so much for being here. Where could we find you if we want to reach out to you?
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes.
First off, I appreciate it. So much fun. If you're looking to reach out, just the first thing I would say is visit my website. It's www.themyospot.com. And on there, you can book a free consultation. I do free consultations all the time, several a day. You can book your own appointment. And then from there, we can have a light conversation. It's about 15 minutes and we talk. It's at no obligation, just to find out if myofunctional therapy is the right thing for you and what your family is going through. Because like we said earlier, everybody is different, right? It's going versus
Absolutely.
individual approach.
I love
That would be the best way. If you're looking to find just content on the social media channels, it's at the Myo Spot for all of them.
Okay, perfect. Well, and I'll have all of that text up on the screen and in the description box below. So wonderful. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for the education that you've provided to my listeners and to my viewers. And I know that there are several families that will really, really get some value out of our conversation today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Sponsors include Blinky Minky Blankets, handmade double-sided Minky blankets, highest quality and craftsmanship, creating your perfect blanket for your loved one as a special forever gift. Code word the mouth for discount today. By Dana Ball Legal Services. Avoid common legal mistakes and protect your small business. Dana makes it affordable for your Utah small business to avoid common legal mistakes with business operations, contracts, and employees. Get more information today at danaballlaw.com.
By Moving with Autism, a service for autism families seeking real estate and design services that provide support for their child's development and family lifestyle. Natalie Castro is a Utah autism real estate specialist and autism sibling whose mission is to connect families to community support with sensory-friendly designs and relocation services. By Elevation Chiropractic Center. Get started on your path to full health. Elevation Chiropractic Center uses the upper cervical chiropractic technique to get results by identifying and solving the root issues of your medical condition quickly and safely. Elevation Chiropractic Center, Salt Lake City, Utah. This story is brought to you by Water and Body Basics, West Valley City, Utah.